absolutely nothing. I then went on the internet and I found a DVD of a guy who'd written a book on inlays in the States and produced a DVD. I bought it for $29, and then they told me I couldn't use it in the UK because the American DVDs don't work in England. So I got my $29 back, and I still haven't found out how to do it properly by experts. Anyway, we've got some experts in our club, and they're hopefully going to show us. No new announcements this month. AGM on the 14th of December. If you want to be on the committee or want to, you should put your nominations in now because it's 14 days before they close. So just a bit about our panelists. We've got Tom Heinersdorf and George Hampson. Both claim to be, not claim, they both do very nice metal inlays because I've seen them. And then we'll have a chat about questions about what they've done. And after the tea break, we will have David Fairman and Emmanuel Tomkin, who are very good at resin inlays, not just to fill cracks, but for decorative purposes, and generally do a very nice job. So there we go. We've got our four panelists on screen now. I think Tom could kick off, if you don't mind, and talk to us about your experience in metal inlaying and how to do it. And then George is also an expert, so he will back you up or give you his view. And then we'll have a few questions, and then we'll move on to the resins, which is Emmanuel and David. So over to you guys. Tom?
Okay. Evening all. Thanks, Dave. I'm no expert in turning or filling, inlaying, however you want to call it. But I have been turning for 6 years, and ever since the beginning, I worked out that Greenwood was free, but usually came with defects. So I needed to learn how to fill the defects. And very early on, I produced this rather strange number. If you look at, I've got two screens. I don't know if, Adam, there's some way of grouping the two screens. One of them is my my phone screen, where I can show more easily what I want people to see. Can you organise that?
I think it's done.
I've done it.
Brilliant. I don't get to see it, but it's okay. I can see it on my phone. So this rather strange looking piece has a gigantic inlay on the side there, just there. And this immense piece of brass, you can probably see it better there.
I can't see that.
You can't or you can?
Cannot.
I can see it very clearly.
Oh.
You have to look at the second Tom Heinersdorf. There's two of me.
Oh,
It's my other personality that's showing it to you. Still can't see it, or can?
No, I can't. Oh, I can see you.
Well, there's
Yeah,
another
I'll
screen of
be
me,
off to one
also called
side.
Tom Heinersdorf.
Adam,
I spotlighted both screens. Also, there should be 5 of you spotlighted at the moment, but I can, if I remove, let's remove.
Move the spotlight onto my
Alter
small
ego.
screen where I'm showing the bit, and then I'll just talk into the other microphone.
Okay, remove spotlight.
Evening, George.
Okay, is it there now for you, George?
yeah, see that?
Okay, so there is this gigantic bit of brass infill, and I learned in the process of doing that several alternative methods and several problems with filling with brass. Now, this was, of course, a knot, and it went right the way through the piece, and I didn't know it until I got inside what I think is a piece of alder. Here are some much smaller pieces of infill there, and you'll see that repeatedly. If I get to show you a few of my works, you'll see that sort of filling in all over the place. But the big one really was a challenge, and because of the big challenge, I tried on another piece a different solution. I tried here, there, you can see this large ring around the knot is a mixture of brass and resin. And I never did it again. I found that muddy appearance so unpleasant that I didn't want it on any of my pieces. And I never worked out how to solve the muddiness. So next to it are some nice shiny bits of brass, and they've been shiny for 5 years. Now, people say that super glue falls out after a few years. And I've heard the number 4, 5, and it hasn't fallen out on me yet. It falls out when I do it anew and I get it wrong, but it doesn't fall out with any of the time that I've yet had. Another sort of fill that I've tried, I can show you here. It's a pretty ugly use of it, but it shows very clearly. This brown around the edge is coffee.
Coffee.
So it's coffee grounds that I have dried in a microwave and then sieved until they're so fine that I can make anything of them. And they still retain a certain coarseness, granularity in the old meaning rather than fineness, coarseness. But you can grind them in with your fingers. And I do that, and I come away with coffee-covered fingers with the super, when the super glue is set. And that, I did that here because this was a completely rotten piece of Hollywood. And the only way I could consolidate it was with super glue. And I had a furrow all the way around because it was soft. And I hadn't realized it until my gouge had taken too much of it away. That's why you get that strange shape around the bottom. And in the middle, you can see a more classic brass disc, which is the mark that I try and put on all my pieces in one form or another. Incidentally, the mark is there because one of my early bowls, I went through the bottom and I had to work out a way of filling the hole. That was it. Finally, before I move on to some of the hows and lessons that I've learned, I wanted to show you this bowl here, because this, I don't know if you probably can see through that. There's a window there. Yes, I can see through it. You can see through it. That window is made of resin. And that resin has been polished with burnishing cream until it is totally transparent. It's glass clear. And it's there completely by accident. I had this piece of chestnut lying on the floor. I was mucking around with resin, and I had a bit of resin left over. And this chestnut log had a hole down the middle. And the only place I could find to put the spare resin was down the hole in the log. And then I turned the log, and that's what I found in the middle. So no special effort. I just poured resin into the hole and then burnished it off the surface.
Tom, can you show the first piece again, please? Someone's asked.
Sorry, the what?
The first piece you showed.
This one here, yes.
Yeah.
So this, for the curious, is a pistachio bowl. You put the pistachios in the top and the shells in the bottom. And it's made in one piece. You can tell it's an early piece because I was so stupid. I hadn't learned that pieces like this are best made in several parts. I made this all in one part. I'm amazed it's still held together, probably because of all the super glue in that huge piece of brass in the middle there. Okay.
What type of resin do you use? Tom was asked.
Well, I did use a type of resin that I wouldn't recommend to anybody. It's a styrene resin, and it's deeply poisonous. It requires use in open air, or at least with doors and windows wide open. Well, it's very runny. So coating surfaces with it is very difficult, but filling holes is pretty easy. I think epoxy resin is easier to use, but I've never used it. This is one of the more strange pieces that I've filled. This is a purely decorative bowl. Where my thumb is here is a bowl. The whole thing was turned on a lathe, and it was really a challenge to me to see if I could turn something quite that eccentric and quite that strange a shape. It is quite thin, as you can see. But once I turned it, this crack appeared as it dried out afterwards. It was green wood, and it dried out, and the crack appeared, and I filled it with brass and returned it. So that bit of brass is, as you can probably see there, very shiny, but on the back, because it went all the way through, the brass is a lot less shiny. It's quite rough, in fact, but it doesn't matter, it's the back. I've used brass very decoratively. Here's a very simple little example. So here's the lid of a pot with a finial that's finished with a little brass point. The reason's obvious. I was holding that in the lathe and it left a hole, so I filled it. When I discovered how pretty that could be, I actually made one like it for the inside, a little button of African blackwood with the brass inside. In fact, I'm so taken with the combination of African blackwood and brass that I'm turning a bowl at the moment made of leadwood. In fact, it's not quite black, and I'm using the same technique. And sometimes it can be really very decorative. There's a split knot. Trying to get the light to shine up for you. There you go. I filled that with brass again. Oh dear, I had it first time off and I'm losing the shine on it now. Where's the shine gone? There you go. That there is a filled knot. And I think it's downright gorgeous and certainly a feature of the bowl.
Tom, sorry to interrupt. The brass, is it a powder, or how do you actually get it to that state?
Okay, so I use the brass out of this little pot. I have a big container and I pour a little bit into here and I pick up a pinch of it from the pot, and as you can see, it's a very, very fine powder. And I knock it into the crevice.
Tom, before you move on to that, the nature of the powder, the brass powder I buy from wood turning suppliers, and for me it needs to be a very soft brass with at least 70% copper content. The stuff that Turner's Retreat or Ockenden or whoever will sell will be right. I did try to buy brass powder on the internet more cheaply, but it turned out to be very hard brass. And once I'd put it in, I couldn't finish the wood back. It was very rough finish, and it sharpening my tool every 10 seconds, literally every 10 seconds, wouldn't do it. So it has to be the right sort of brass, very fine and quite soft.
I never played with alternative sources of brass. I did toy with the idea of using the what's it called? The metal shards that come off locksmiths making of keys, for example. There's a lot of brass in their workshops, but it's far too big. It has to be extremely fine. I've never run into George's problem of softness. I mean, he's talked about it before, so I'm not new to the idea, but I've always bought from Ockenden their brass, and it's perfectly good. And for 20 quid or so for a kilo, it lasts, well, pretty much a year with me. So what I do is I get a bowl, it's got a crack in it like this. I take this powder and I put it into the crack. And this is quite a deep crack, so it's going to take a bit of putting in. That's not going to worry me. I just put more until it's full. So there's the crack, there's the powder, and I'm just pushing it into the crack. I just play it over the crack until it falls in and the crack is full. And then when the crack is full, I get my super glue and I put it on top. But it's not just any super glue. It has to be ultra fine super glue. This is going to need quite a lot of brass. So this is a rough turn bowl, and it's cracked since it's been, it was first turned. So I just keep piling the brass in, and if I haven't got a sealed back to the crack, of course it keeps pouring out at the other end. And if the crack on the other side is open, I put a bit of masking tape over it, and that keeps it in. That's pretty full now. I just tap the bowl, and lo and behold, there's plenty more crack that's appeared there. Sorry, my picture froze there for a second. There's the crack, and I've knocked the powder in, but it's still. Trying to show it to you. Thought this would be easier, but it's not. There's the crack. There. Yes, I think you can just see it on the edge of the image there. So I'm going to put some more brass in, and then I'll put some glue on, and you can hopefully see. I'm being generous with the brass this evening because I'm trying to save on time here. But pushing the brass into the hole, just tapping it until the brass has gone right down in. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this ultra fine super glue, which has what they call wicking properties. And that means it wicks down just like candle wax goes up a wick. And it goes down to the bottom of the crack if the glue is in good condition. I use this glue here, and I have to tell you, it's pretty variable in its condition. I'm on the verge of sending this lot back. I bought 3 bottles from the same batch, and I don't think they're working very well. I keep them in the fridge until I'm going to use them. My workshop's ice cold. So when they say, oh, you're keeping it too warm, I tell them that's rubbish. So what I do is I've got a long beak on the end of this, as you can see. You buy those on eBay. They come in a variety of shapes, and they mostly fit the standard bottles. And I just pour it into the crack very gently. Let me see if I can get that round so you can see a bit better. Just down the crack, and it takes a bit of time for it to seep in, and it gets around the sides as well, as you can see by the width of that stain, which is going to be a pain because it's going to set that brass that's there as well. But this is a rough turn bowl, so I don't care very much. And it takes a long time to go off sometimes. I used to use a different super glue from a different supplier that went out of business, and that just set instantaneously, and I wish this did. But if there's a puddle and you want to do something about it, take a bit of brass and just sprinkle it on top, and that just absorbs the glue. You're going to turn it off anyway, and it's bone dry now. Nothing sticking there at all. So that's a crack filled, and when I get round to turning that bowl, there's no sign of a crack anywhere there. Now, what I might find is that the glue didn't penetrate. And if the glue didn't penetrate, then I shall refill in the course of turning. The brass might come spewing out in powder form, but it doesn't matter. Just put a bit more in. There's another crack down here I noticed, which I hadn't noticed before. So I'll just rub some of this spare brass in. There we go. Fall down and fill that while we're at it. There we go. George, I'm sure you wanted to say some more. Let me hand over to you and get a sip of water.
Yeah, and I think you're right about the materials. I haven't got a lot to show. I've just got one thing to show, which is, I don't know whether you can see it's a bowl with an inlay. And I started not by filling cracks, but trying to do decorative work. And I found one thing I did find was that I couldn't sand it back. And I put the brass in, and if it stands proud, if I try to sand it, I sand the wood away, and the brass just stays there. What I do use is a heavy-duty scraper, just taking very thin layers off, taking virtually none of the wood, but taking the brass off. But that does require the wood to be stable, and I think David's found this problem, that if you've got your bowl and you leave it too long and it goes slightly out of shape, as you probably know, as turners, if the edge is slightly out, it's a bit dangerous to put the scraper to it. So I tend to do the inlay as early as possible, and before I do the other side. Other than that, I think Tom has done a very good presentation on it, on how to do it. For the stuff that I do, I need the inlay powder, which I use little spills of paper to put it in, and I just get a spill of paper with some brass in it, and I can then just put that into the hole. The super glue has to be the very thin wicking grade, and the only two tools that I need a very fine, usually a parting tool to cut the decorative groove, and then a scraper to finish it. And I found that I just polish up the piece in the normal way, and that seems to protect the brass from corrosion as it affects the wood.
George, what is your preferred sanding technique? When you've had trouble sanding the brass and not the wood, what is your preferred sanding technique?
Well, I prefer not to sand if it's brass.
But if you sand generally, what do you do? Inertial sander or handheld?
I use power sanding.
Because in the beginning, you gave me some advice to use a scraper when I ran into trouble trying to put a decorative ring into a fine goblet. And you advised me to scrape, and I did, and it solved my problem for all the reasons you've explained. But actually, since then, I've never had that problem again. And although I do use a scraper from time to time, merely because it's quicker and less dusty, I usually just sand over the top. I've got now to a point where I try not to overfill with brass. I use the edge of a credit card to smooth it mostly. And then I don't have much left over, and I just go straight to sanding. And I don't have it standing proud. Yeah,
you're probably much better at it than I am, because I end up with little mountains in the end because I'm trying to make sure that it's full. If you're, as you say, you're doing yours so that it's very little standing proud, it may well work to sand it, but it certainly doesn't work for me.
Maybe that's it. I wanted just to show you something that goes wrong, which is intriguing, because here is a rough turn bowl, and there in the bottom is my signature brass. Oh, hang on. Okay, thanks, Adam.
Oh, yeah.
There's the bottom. Is my signature brass disc, but you can see that it's got what you're probably seeing as marks. That's actually flaking, and what's happened is that the brass has been lifted by the movement of the wood. I've seen that once or twice. I mean, I must have filled like this, somewhere between 50 and 100 bowls, I should think, in one way or another. And this is the first time that I've seen it happen on that disc, which I've cut deliberately. There's not a flaw in the wood that I'm trying to conceal. I've cut that hole, I've filled it with brass, and it's lifted. So I'll redo it, but it's the only time it's ever gone wrong. Another thing that you might be interested in seeing is, this is work in progress. It's actually a bowl I've only just started. This is African leadwood. And on the bottom is a floor, which I chose to fill with brass, as well as put my disc on. It's pretty much finished, that bottom. I don't think I'm going to do much more to it. And the point is that because brass is kind of a color that's natural to wood, it doesn't disturb me at all that the two are next to each other. One clearly man-made and the other clearly nature-made. Works very well. I'm looking forward to this brass showing through as contrast on the inside of the bowl as well. I don't know if any of you are interested in seeing the coffee. Would that be of interest to anybody?
Everyone's muted, but I'm going to go with yes.
Okay.
That's just the same technique. You put the coffee powder in and then super glue, is it, Tom?
Yes. Yes, absolutely the same technique. Well, here on the tip of this this extraordinary sculptural piece, remember, this is really just me trying it on with myself rather than anybody else. In amongst this bark here is coffee. But I defy anybody to find it. You just cannot see it. So the point is that you can roughen the surface afterwards as well. You don't have to smooth it. I smoothed the brass, but roughened the coffee. And it's extraordinarily effective.
Does it smell like coffee?
Not once it's been glued, no. The other point I just wanted to make quickly is best made by this bowl. This is a complete Turner's travesty. Let me see if I can get it so you can see the travesty. Oh, there we go. That's not bad. So across there is a crack, and it cuts the bowl in half. And in fact, at the bottom here, just to complete the last point, that brown down there is coffee. And there's a bit of brass as well. And what's happened here is I filled it when it was a rough blank and I was turning. I didn't fill it at the end when I was finishing. And the brass or the coffee or both together have acted as a cement, and they've cemented two halves of the blank together, which I was able to successfully turn. And it's quite thin. That's what about, I suppose, 5mm at the thickest, maybe 6 or 7 in some thicker parts. And it was worth saving because it's a lovely piece of timber. But it couldn't have been done without the effect of the brass cement. In other places, this bowl here was a complete beaut until it cracked as it dried out. It was, of course, a piece of plum of one sort or another. And there at the top, you can see a gigantic crack that I filled with brass. But fortunately, I'd rough turned it, and so I was able to re-sand it, although it had warped completely out of shape. Yes, you can see there quite well, I think. It's still a lovely, beautiful piece of wood that I wanted to save. So to George's point, I just sanded this. I couldn't scrape it. It was so warped. There was nothing else I could do but sand it. And it's completely flush, completely smooth, imperceptibly present except by color. One last piece I wanted to show you is a piece that I've not yet given to the future recipient, because this lady gave me a whole very old apple tree trunk. And I said, oh, I'll make you a bowl. So I've made her this bowl. She hasn't seen it yet, but being fruit wood, the blasted thing split all over the place. I'm not sure that the lighting is going to pick this up, but almost any dark line you can see there is actually brass. Maybe you can see it better on the outside. Oh, there's a field of brass cracks around there. Yes, there they are. They're just beginning to show there. So this is completely filled with brass everywhere. It cracked the whole way round. This beautiful piece of dark heartwood at the bottom cracked everywhere. And then here, this is a field of rot, which I consolidated with super glue, and it went and split on me in gratitude. So I had to fill that split there as well. I suspect that about 10, maybe 20% of the weight of this bowl is brass. It's that bad, but it still looks pretty good. And the inside was worth saving. I hope you'll agree. So that's me just about all done. If anybody's got any questions, why don't we all unmute and just fire away questions? Or George, do you have anything else to say?
You can unmute now if you want to. Should be able to.
George, what sandpaper do you use for sanding?
George,
sorry, what was that? What do I use for sanding?
What sandpaper?
I use Rhino Grip, the stuff with stuff on the back for sticking it to the to a disc.
Right.
Velcro.
So I use Rhino Grip, and
is that for wood?
Hmm?
Is that for wood?
Yeah.
Have you tried using emery paper?
I haven't. I've got emery paper for something else, but
because you're trying to rub metal down, but what you're actually doing is rubbing the wood away, so you're getting ridges on where the brass is. But if you used emery paper, it would take the brass rather than the wood.
That's worth trying. As I say, I normally use a scraper, which works fine for me, and that's my normal technique. And I only use the sandpaper to finish it and get it mirror smooth. But emery paper sounds a good idea. Yes, thank you.
No worries.
I have a question for Tom. You said that you stabilised the wood with super glue before you filled it. So you put super glue in before you added the powder?
Well, depending on the piece, I choose a different sequence of attack.
That's what is troubling me at the moment, which is the piece of that maple that we got.
Yeah.
Do I put that on the bonfire, or do I spend a long time filling all of those cracks?
Oh, that looks gorgeous. Why don't you fill it?
I'll have it.
I'm willing to put the time in, but I don't know. I don't want to waste my time if, having done it, the whole thing is going to fall apart.
No, it won't fall apart for the reason I showed you. So long as you've filled it with something with the super glue, acting as a cement, that will never fall apart. You've got to use the right super glue. You've got to use that ultra thin so it wicks in. Gosh, you're good at lighting your pieces. I wish I could do the same job.
Yeah, this is obviously rough turn. I watched something on YouTube that was twice turn bowls, and that was the idea. So that's the first turn, and I'm sort of drying it in the microwave and doing all of that stuff. So far, it's lost 7% of its weight, but I don't know whether to carry on. But you're inspiring me to give it a go.
What was the wood, Cliff?
It was maple. Remember, we got at the club, there was a load of maple left outside for us, and I got about 3 big chunks. This is half a big chunk.
So I think maple is a relatively dry wood, although you've obviously got a very rotten piece there. So it's surprisingly heavy. You're going to need to lose, what, about 30, 40, maybe even 50% of the weight? So you've got a way to go. Does it feel cold to you when you hold it?
Not especially.
Well, maybe it's a lot drier than the rot suggests.
It feels quite dry. But, I mean, I only did it yesterday, first time, the drying. And each time I gave it 4 minutes in the microwave, it was losing about 14 grams.
I think you can do a future talk for us all on how to microwave your wood.
It was from the same YouTube thing that I got the idea.
What I would say there is that I'd be reluctant to start filling so many cracks while it's still drying. Wait until it's thoroughly dry, because otherwise it will crack around the filling.
Crack,
it's going to be dry first.
Okay, well,
I've not found that actually. I've not found that it cracks around the filling. I've very often filled part dry wood. I very often find that it cracks somewhere else. That's a different matter. But usually the filling itself remains rock solid.
Yeah, my
experience is different.
Yeah, my intention is to keep drying it until it stops losing significant weight.
Yes. Well, that time you'll be completely safe.
Yeah.
George.
Yes.
My problem has been the depth of the groove. If you don't cut the groove deep enough and you fill it, and then you sand it or scrape it, you're going to reach the bottom of the brass, and expose the wood. So it's a waste of time. If you make the groove very deep, the chances are you'll get voids. Well, I get voids when you scrape it. So you scrape it, and then there's a void. So you try and refill it. But at the end of the day, it was all a big disaster. In fact, I've got 1 or 2 images which Adam may have, I could show you. So I tried several times, but I could never get a uniform rim all around the bowl. And maybe because that was a rim on a very big bowl, so it wasn't like you said. There you are, there's an image of and you can see the voids in the rim where I've reached the bottom of the brass. And of course, it's knackered, you can't do that. And I think the diameter of the bowl doesn't have, there's some more voids there. And the problem was, I think if you need to go a lot deeper with the rim, perhaps you've got some suggestions. Yeah, now that's the bowl which I gave up on it, and I just cut the brass out and just made a very nice plain bowl, which, I gave it away. She was delighted with it. So I got quite a bit of money for that, and it was better than the brass. But the point is, you get to these voids, and it's very upsetting because you wasted all that time.
How did you pack it in?
I only cut 2 or 3 millimeters at most, because when I'm cutting back with the scraper, it's only the brass that I'm cutting, not the surrounding wood. But I do find that I get voids, and I have to go through and fill them, and then recut, and then fill them, and then recut 2 or 3 times. But it's being very, very careful with the scraping so that you're only taking the brass and not the wood.
Well, that was the other point. If you use sandpaper, if you use a sander, a power sander, you're going to sand the wood away and leave the brass proud. And that's not very nice either. So,
Why don't you just use an inertial sander?
you mean a handheld thing?
Yeah,
Yeah, but
Power sanding, you get too hot and it'll melt the glue.
yeah, exactly.
it just doesn't do anything on the brass because the brass is too hard.
Let's just. I've no idea what brass you're using. This one here.
Ockenden, same as yours. I think.
Well, I've never had a problem with this. This one here, I tried to reproduce your problems. So this, I measured the depth of the groove. It's 1.5 mil, 1.5 millimeter groove.
It's very shallow.
Very shallow, and I sanded it, and it's absolutely glossed. I mean, it's just so smooth and completely flush, and totally.
Would it be the glue you're using? Different glues? Would that make a difference?
What glue are you using, Dave?
Well, thin super glue. I'm sure the brass is right and the glue's right. It's just
thin or ultra thin?
Yeah, I'm using exactly that. It's just the technique is I haven't quite got it yet. Anyway.
I offered you a tutorial. Come get it.
Yeah, I'll take you up on it. Anyway, that's fascinating. Really is. Any more questions? I'm sure there's lots of questions going around.
Well, I have a question, David, that others might be able to help. The biggest problem I have is the super glue and its fumes.
Yes.
I haven't been able to find a mask that helps. And in fact, putting the mask on actually makes it worse.
I can help you with that because
Don't put a mask on.
I'm a scuba diver, so I have several very good underwater masks. and they do actually work very well. If you put a dive mask on, you will never get any fumes in your face.
How do you breathe?
You could get your staff to do it for you, George.
What's breathing?
I'll lend you one of my dive masks.
Right.
George, I tell you what I've discovered with the fumes. They happen in certain circumstances, and I have no idea what the circumstances are.
And keep the windows open.
But some woods, I think usually wetter ones, fume and others don't. I always take my mask off because the fumes concentrate inside, and that's awful. But they don't actually propagate very far, the fumes. They stay quite close to the crack. So I just move my face away.
And if you open the window, the brass blows out.
I am curious about one thing. If ever I use super glue in this sort of application, I always find that the super glue seeps into the wood and then stains it beyond the boundaries of the crack that I'm trying to fill. And so then there's not a hard transition between the filling and the wood. And so I've taken quite recently to using something like epoxy, like a 5-minute epoxy. And so, Tom, I'm wondering how you get by this, or if you have the same problem of the super glue staining the wood that you're doing beyond the crack that you're trying to fill.
Yeah, I certainly know the problem you're talking about. There are two solutions. One is to do it slightly earlier in your process because the stain isn't that deep, and you can sand it away. But I do accept that in some woods that are particularly porous, you can find that stain a long way in. So the second solution, if you're working on porous woods, is to seal it first. Seal it before you fill it.
Okay, and Tom, what would you seal it with? Just a sanding sealer, you mean, or something else?
Well, I've usually used sanding sealer, but recently I've also used successfully a wax. So I don't think it matters. I'd rather not get anything into the crack that I'm afterwards going to want the glue to hold on to. So I try to just wipe something lightly over the surface and along the crack rather than across the crack so it doesn't go in.
Yeah, it occurs to me, if in my experience, if I would use wax of some description, that would stop the super glue or certainly impede the super glue adhering to the piece that you're actually trying to repair.
Logically, I agree. I've never reproduced that situation, but I do agree that.
No, it's happened to me more than once, yeah.
George, can you give me the percentage again of this brass copper mix? Because that's interesting.
I think you'll find it's at least 70% copper.
70%. Then it isn't.
If you look up brass on Wikipedia, it talks about all kinds of grades, and what you want is the softest grade.
Yeah.
So when you
Feedback. Oh, feedback.
Ockenden Timbers brass is perfect.
Or Turner's Retreat.
They have it as well, do they? Yeah.
In Tirani.
I think the feedback is coming from John Sutton's microphone.
Not now, it isn't. just quickly, because the discussion on sandpaper had me reflect that actually I don't usually use the sheet material because it clogs quickly, and when it clogs, the brass that you picked up, that can stain, that can get into the grain around. So I use this stuff here. Oh, can you see that? Probably can't. Merca Abranet. Anyway, this is my sheaf of different grades that I keep to hand. And I've got here from 80 through to 1,000 grit. And at 600, brass begins to get a nice shine. And at 1,000, it's gleaming.
And you can wash it as well. You can clean
Yes.
it.
Oh, I very often do. When I'm working with wet wood, I put it into water and yes.
Fascinating. Well, a really, really interesting discussion.
Gordon, do you have a question?
Yes. Yes, I do. Can you use other sorts of glue? And also, when you're using super glue, I think you need a PP3 carbon filter rather than just a dust mask to stop the fumes.
I've never tried using another glue apart from my much regretted forays into the resin that I described earlier.
Yeah, it has to be a very thin glue, a wicking grade glue that will actually soak through into the powder. Anything that sits on the surface is going to be no good to you. So it has to be super thin, and the only ones I know that are that thin and that effective are the super glues.
The gas mask that you want to use to stop the fumes are the same as what the welders use. You've got two filters either side. That's for gas and small particles. That way you won't get that super glue fumes into your airways. But you might
want to take your mask off. I mean, if you're trying to do it with a mask that isn't appropriate, don't. Take the mask off rather than use the wrong mask.
But the only other thing that you'll get is maybe your eyes might start stinging from the fumes.
Well, the dive mask certainly stops fumes getting into your eyes. And if you keep the window open, then that's fine.
I think we mentioned that once. I mean, the best way when you're using anything that sort of disseminating fumes is to have proper ventilation, and also having a small fan behind you, which will actually push the fumes away from you. I mean, this is what I use. This is what I use in my workshop. Is just having a small, a fan standing behind you, and the air pushes it away from you instead of you breathing it in. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what kind of mask you're wearing. It's it's a carcinogenic. Fumes. It will go through that filter, and you won't get the smell of it, but you will get the particles of it. And so the best way to do that is to just blow the fumes away. And you need to use it in a proper ventilated room.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Steve here. I agree with Emmanuel. I've done that with a fan behind me, but I also run my dust collector behind the piece, and that's enough usually to pull any fumes away, certainly away from yourself.
Well, I think we've had a great discussion. We've got another presentation to come, and we'd run that now. And at the end of that, we can carry on having a general discussion about both presentations. So if either David or Manuel would like to kick off on resin inlays as opposed to brass, We're all ears.
Do you want me to go first?
It's up to you. Yeah.
Right, you are.
Okay, Dave, I'm just going to mute everyone first, and then I'll meet you.
All right, boss.
And then Dave. After me. So, David, you should be able to unmute yourself now. Yeah.
Sure.
Cool.
Right.
And the screen.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
My little foray into resin work, I've been so kind by people saying that I know what I'm doing, but basically I really don't.
Sorry. Sorry, David, you got muted again. Can you just unmute yourself? Sorry.
There you go. Right.
Sorry.
I had the compliment saying that I was okay with resin work, but to be honest, this is only my third time of using resin. And the first time that I used it was 51 years ago when I was 9. And I basically just started using resin again because of being friends with Emmanuel, and he does a lot of resin work himself. Got me to thinking, well, I've got a lot of wood that have developed cracks, and other than putting it on the fire, what could I do with it? And knowing Emmanuel, he said, "Oh, give it to me." So I'd given him a lot of wood, and he's turned into some really, really nice pieces, which I was a bit green about. But I decided to go down the resin track because recently I was asked to make some coffee cups, and a lot of the wood that I used was fairly well cracked, and the only way that I could use it was by filling out with resin. And Adam's got some photographs that I took of my recent piece. Do you want to start on those from, let's see, that's the first piece that I had, and that's a piece of Laurus nobilis, or for the uninitiated, bay laurel. It was from my brother-in-law's garden, and it was really, really nice when I got it, but over the year, it's developed that nice big crack. And it's not just on one side, it's all around the others, as you can see. Ordinarily, that would go in the bin. But using resin now, it's becoming quite fun. So this piece I'm now making into 6 vessels, or maybe containers. I haven't really decided what I'm going to do with it yet. So basically all I've done is cut it into sections. They're 150 mil long. And then I've got to find a suitable vessel that I can contain it so that it will hold the resin. As you can see, those cracks are quite deep and they're down to the pith on all of them. So it was a piece of wood that I didn't really want to waste. So just to get it to fit into my receptacle, I had to trim it down and use, well, my shed was smelling really, really nice because of the bay laurel. This was my only method that I could use for containing the resin and the piece at the same time. Just cutting the top off of it, and it gives me a deep enough piece to sit in the blank, as you can see there. And then all I do then is with a heat gun, shrink it to that as it is there. This could have been a bit longer, but unfortunately not. And then in the top, pour the resin, which I'm using as a Epoxy, which is a 2-to-1. It is really, really fume free, Very, very clear. It's glass clear. You don't need a pressure pot. The bubbles disappear. And it's lovely. It's the cheapest that you can find. And unfortunately, it's coming from Germany. I tried to find a company in the UK to keep it local, but they're all twice the money. But the German product is flawless. And this is just some color acrylic that I used. Just dropping it into the mix and basically filling up the cracks. And this was left overnight. And as you can see, it does get a bit messy. So you need a bit of a tray that's mixed up. And basically for that one piece, I needed 200 millimeters of mixture, including the color. And that piece there today has come out really, really nice. And unfortunately, because I couldn't get up to the top, there's a bit of a void, but I can cut that off anyway.
That's it for the slides.
And there should be a little, should be a video, no?
No, I didn't get a video.
I sent it to your WhatsApp, I think,
because
it was too big to go on to email.
Okay, bear with me. Talk amongst yourselves.
Brilliant.
Okay, hang on. Let me figure out how to share this. 1 minute.
All right, mate. No worries. So consequently, all those pieces that I would normally have gone in the bin, I can now do something really, really, really beneficial for myself. The piece that I've done with the red, off with sandpaper up to 320. I then give it a bit of a drink with mineral oil, and then I used briar wax whilst it's movement, and then finished it off with carnauba wax just for today, and it's come out really, really nice and so smooth. Now all I've got to do now is decide what I'm going to do with it. Is this the video?
Maybe.
Okay.
Take the phone to the back. When the phone to the phone, press trust. I get that. Hang on. What can you guys see?
No worries. Nothing.
Yeah, hang on. 1 minute then. It's not working. Isn't technology great?
Love it.
Let's try it again. Let's try that. Hang on. Okay. Naturally, everything takes time. Keep talking amongst yourselves.
Any questions?
Oh, hang on. 1 minute. I can get to the. Okay. This is the video.
Lovely.
Hopefully you can see it. Or not. Hang on.
Right.
Bear with me. There it is. It's not the best quality, but it'll do.
It'll do.
Long. Had lots of cracks in, but it didn't have when I first got it. Be lovely to turn, but then the cracks started coming, and then they kept coming. So I thought I'd do something with it, and this demo came up just in time. And I think the colours have worked out really, really well. My container that I had wasn't big enough, really, to get all the ends in. So I've got what I've got. There's another one there, didn't quite fill up. But I think you'll find that it's come up really, really well. and this has had just mineral oil and dry wax and a coat of carnauba wax buffed up, and I kind of like it. I think I might do the rest like this, but with a few different colours. This is lovely wood. Shed smells lovely. And guys, this is easy to do. So if you've got any split wood, don't throw it away. Invest in some resin, get the job done.
Okay. So, question from Cliff. People can also unmute themselves now. Can you tape up around the whole piece to seal it?
Yeah, instead of looking for the receptacle, if you just wound tape around it to seal it, wouldn't that work?
I thought about that, Cliff. The problem with that is I have done a piece similar, but the resin finds its way through the tape.
Right.
And then you'll end up with puddle on the wherever you're holding it.
Okay.
If I tried it with tape, and David's right. I puddled all over the shed, and I ended up.
It's not fun.
Yeah, lots of resins all over the place.
I had another experience, Cliff, that may be a salutary one. I poured it into a huge silver birch log, actually, that I hollowed out as a plant pot holder, and the resin went straight through the end grain at the bottom.
Oh,
yeah, it drinks it.
Can you use plastic padding
for the cracks?
You know, car filler.
Yeah, that's a bit
Body
like
filler.
that would fill it up. Yeah, you would do that, but you wouldn't. It's not really conducive for use with food. It's okay on automotive industry, but you wouldn't put it around a vessel that you're going to drink out of. It's not. You'd still taste it. Whereas the resin, I've used that on coffee cups where it gets really hot and you don't taste it at all.
One other point about what can you use to wrap around it. I mean, one thing you have to be very careful of is that as the resin sets, it gives off a lot of heat. I mean, it can go up to about 65 degrees, sometimes 70 degrees centigrade. I mean, depending on how much you're using. If you're using a soft materials, it will actually melt it, and then you will just sort of feel a bit disappointed with yourself.
It's quite funny because you and I use the same product, but the pieces that I'm filling, they don't get that hot, or rather, I don't find them getting that hot.
Yeah, if you're using a thin layer, then that's all right, because then the heat will dissipate quite quickly. But then if it's a bit of thicker layer, and then goes further inside the wood, then it will actually heat up. I mean, I would just show you one.
Yeah.
I mean, later on, if I can, how it actually gets really hot as you're doing it.
Mm.
Does it depend on the proportion of the two parts?
Sorry?
Does the heat depend on the proportions of the two parts of the epoxy?
Well, if it's mixed correctly, it would all come down to the volume that you're using. Like I say, I'm only using 200 mil, but if I was using 2 liters, that probably would get really, really hot. Okay. I had that resin that you gave me, and I only used a small amount, and that got really hot. I couldn't hold that, but it went off really, really quick. That was fast setting, but that went off quick and was very hot, but for a small amount.
Yeah, and that's also depends on the speed of setting. Like if you try to use it in the summer, and some resin will set very quickly, and the quicker it sets, the more heat it actually gives out.
Yeah.
How much is this resin you buy?
I think for 2 litres, I'm spending about £30. You want to get the one that I showed, that's from Amazon. And that's with free delivery as well.
Yeah, anything over £20, free delivery.
Yeah. But if you shop around, I mean, all the Turner's places, they're selling the resin. And I was hoping not to buy the German product. But looking around, trying to keep it local, there's nothing that comes close. It's all very expensive, unfortunately.
That was a huge crack you had there. Suppose you wanted,
it was.
Relatively small cracks. Would it still be okay?
Yeah, definitely.
Pistachio, can I have a word?
Fire away.
I've tried doing some of these resins before, and I find them tremendously hard and very, very brittle. Got any suggestions on that?
If it's brittle, well, that's just because it's plastic. It would all depend on how you're cutting it. The piece that I turned today, that was just with just on a shear cut with a 1/2-inch bowl gouge, and you got a couple of little I don't know, shards where they cracked out, but you just go over it lightly, and you can cut those away. But it's just with a very slight shear cut.
It could also depend on what resin you're using. There are so many different ones out there, and it different. The polyesters are very brittle and can cause that problem if it was a polyester resin. Epoxy are less brittle in that way, and if you're using epoxy.
And they're easier to use, the epoxy ones.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I think
the styrene I was using was also very brittle.
Yeah, I think the other ones that you have to have a pressure tank, they can be quite brittle as well, just because of the nature that they've been pushed under so much pressure. They become very hard, a bit like glass, literally. And if you're using a scraper, just the blunt edge will create that to crackle, and you'll get a sharp break-in. Then you've got to go over it and try and scrape it a bit more.
Also, I mean, just bear in mind that most resins out there, you cannot use a depth of more than 2 centimeters at a time. If you try to make it too thick, it will actually crack because it becomes very brittle. So you just have to do it just like you're doing on a table. You just have to do it like 2 millimeters and then wait for it to set, then add the other 2 millimeters. If you try to add all 5 millimeters in one go, it will actually crack. And it's the same.
Thank you.
It's not a quick process. Any more?
Yes, it's Gordon here. I'd like to just warn you about bay laurel. The black berries are poisonous, and a colleague in the Middlesex Club had a huge allergic reaction to it when he was turning, and had to have very definite medical help to get over it.
Wow. And that was bay laurel, was it?
Yeah. I'm sure it was Bay Laurel. And in fact, he's written something for the Middlesex newsletter, but I'm not sure if it's going to be in the next issue or the one after.
Is he okay now?
Yeah, he's okay now, but he had a really nasty time of it. You know, when it happened.
Wow. I haven't noticed anything from this. I suppose I'm considered lucky then. But
is bay laurel a laurel or a bay?
It's a bay.
It's a bay because you cook with bay, yeah. But laurel is
that's right.
poisonous.
No, it's a. This one here is actually the bay that you cook with.
All right.
The other one with the bigger leaves with the black berries, that is a bay laurel. That's not this.
Right.
Well, at the beginning, I think you described it as bay laurel, which is why I was sort of jumping up and down a bit.
No, I understand. It's actually called, it's a Laurus nobilis.
That's the one with bay leaves you cook with.
Yeah. But it's like a lot of things. If you've got a piece of wood that you're not sure about, I'd do the investigation first and find out what it is you're actually using. You know, same as you would with yew and laburnum, any of these woods, even walnut, that you can get an allergic reaction to. But be very careful.
Yeah, the problem, of course, is that different woods affect different people. I had a bad time with bog oak.
Bog oak. Where'd you get bog oak from?
Ireland. Seriously.
I mean, you can get it because it's still being dug up in East Anglia and also, I believe, Lincolnshire.
Okay. I've never used it.
David, can you post the actual make and source of your epoxy German stuff?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll put that right onto our club website.
Thanks.
On WhatsApp.
Any other questions?
There you go. It's on the WhatsApp now, and you get it from eBay, Amazon. It's going slow tonight. Everyone must be satisfied. There's no questions.
Oh, that was entertaining. That was informative.
Thank you very much.
The check's in the post, I hope.
So long as it's not $2.50. Cooking tonight.
Can I ask a question?
No.
Oh, okay.
Fire away.
Have you tried any other colours besides the acrylic ones?
I've only got two colours, the yellow and a red. I'm thinking about investing in a whole bunch of different colours. My friend Emmanuel, who'll be coming on in a minute, he's got a lot of other colours, and he can do some amazing things with them.
I'll wait for Emmanuel's talk then.
That'd be good, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can only answer for red and yellow.
Okay.
Anyone else? Oh, just as a mention, George had a problem with the height of the brass and the wood. I've got something similar with this, just across here. I can actually feel it. The resin's lower than the wood. And they've both been sanded at the same time. There's that other piece. It's a definite step. Not going to make no difference, but it's definitely there.
If you resanded it, Dave, would it still develop? I mean, is it the resin shrinking in some way more than the wood?
It may be the fact that I brought the wood in from the shed into the house, and the wood expanding. I don't know, but when I sanded it and polished it, it was all flat. But now, if I take it into the shed tomorrow, it might go down. But that's just wood moves.
Take them into coffee mugs.
Dave, I've got something similar. I wonder how long ago did you sand that piece? You know, did you finish that?
Lunchtime today.
It's moved that much in a matter of 6 or 8 hours.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Thank you.
It is fairly moist in my shed, but the wood, it was only about 17%. So it's still fairly dry.
Yeah, I've had about 1 in 10 problems with that using epoxy resin, where the wood has just sort of moved slightly and created a ridge.
Yeah.
It is just about difference in the temperatures, that's all.
Exactly. Another thing that I found, using the right resin, I used the wrong resin in a piece, a little beaker that I made, similar sort of thing, crack all the way down, and I filled it with the wrong resin, and it was a commission piece, but fortunately I made more than I needed, and this was one that I didn't give, and I used it myself, and after about a week of use it started to leak, and I'm glad I didn't give it as the commission. So it's a case of you've got to be wary of what resins that you use. And the stuff that I'm using at the moment is strong. It does adhere to the wood as well. Whereas the other piece that I use, it couldn't have done because it's giving way. So now I've got to find a way of taking it out and backfilling it. So if anyone's got any tips on backfilling.
Did you seal it at all, the crack? Sorry, I missed your earlier part, so I came in a bit late.
Did I seal it?
Yeah.
No, it was a block, exactly the same as this. I filled it exactly the same way, but with a different resin, and the resin didn't stick to the wood, whereas this stuff is wood.
If you seal the wood, it stops that happening. It also stops air bubbles coming through.
I couldn't seal the wood because, ordinarily that would be fine, but these cracks were inside and you didn't see them. It was only when you pour it through, it soaks in and finds the cracks. That was the only thing. But I had extras, so I was all right. Safety in numbers. Any more? Oh, and it was cherry. Bloody cherry.
Can I just go back to the brass talk? And has anybody had any experience of not using epoxy, not using super glue, but to use epoxy mixed with brass? Because on YouTube, that's all there is. And if you mix epoxy resin with brass, it looks okay until you start turning it, and then it's all muddy and not very nice.
Well, I showed you, Dave, the muddiness of my styrene resin with brass, but I've not used epoxy.
Okay, I don't want to take up time of the Emmanuel's presentation, so perhaps we should just get on with that.
Okay, so are you going to mute everyone again, and then I'll mute you, Emmanuel. Spotlight video. And then hang on. Oh, you're talking. Wait. Okay. Emmanuel, it should be asking you if you want to unmute.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good. You're good to go.
Okay. I think anyway, the image is just sort of hi. I mean, I'm not an expert in sort of working with resins, but I've been doing it for quite some time, and I like doing it really. I use it for making sort of jewelry, mix of resins. I mean the epoxy resins with wood. I use it for pens, and also I mean for making vases and bowls. I mean I use it in there. If I may just show you, I just want to try and share my screen. Excuse me for my naivety with Zoom. I normally use Microsoft Teams, so I will try and share my screen to just show you the PowerPoint that I use. Where is my screen? Okay, it's this one here. Let's see, share. Okay, can everybody see see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, normally, how do I start? I start with a normal piece of wood, which I normally keep in the garden for about sort of like between a year and 2 years. And for various purposes, really. One is to allow cracks to come through it, because I like, I mean, seeing the cracks. And secondly, I like a bit of spout also in the wood, I mean, to appear. So I would start with I mean, a piece of wood like this one, which I had, I mean, it's been in the garden. And before I would sort of like decide to fill that up with anything, I would actually mount it up on the lathe and just sort of like clear it up into a clear tunnels, which I could actually see all the cracks become quite visible in them. And then I would start actually decide what exactly am I going to do with it. And I will try now to show you a small, let me see which one I will actually show first. And before I move on to that, let me minimize that PowerPoint. Okay, I think it's this one, which is I hope it's this one. Yeah, it shows you what I do. I mean, you can see there already what I've got. I have minimized my talking through that, because I know that somebody has listened to it. So let me just okay, yeah, let me just play that. So let me just, anyway, just listen to what I say just a little bit.
I want to assign myself to today. For this one, I like turning wood with some cracks in it, and because I think sometimes they add up to the features of the wood. Now this one has got one big crack in. It's a bit irregular, which is very good. However, it runs right through, and it's going to be a bit difficult to sort of leave it as it is. So what I'm going to do, I think I'm going to open up a bit more sort of smaller cracks in it. And yeah, so probably I think I've got a nice
no images here, which no images here, Emmanuel.
As well. Anyway, I don't know if it's gonna how deep it goes.
Emmanuel, we can't see anything. You see the PowerPoint.
There's no image, no images.
There's no. So, oh, you couldn't see the PowerPoint.
No, all we see is the PowerPoint. We just see the go to slideshow. It says.
Oh, sorry. I mean, let me just go on. And sorry, in pause. Okay. Yeah. I mean, have you paused my sharing?
No, we can still see the PowerPoint, which can't see anything else. We only see the PowerPoint.
Let me just it's not a PowerPoint I'm showing now. I'm showing our
you can stop sharing and restart the sharing so we can see the other screen.
Video. Okay. Okay, that's from this one.
There we go.
But is that okay?
Yes.
And there's another two right here, which I want to.
Can you hear it as well?
Quiet. I like turning wood with some cracks in it, and because I think sometimes they add up to the features of the wood. Now this one has got one big crack in. It's a bit irregular, which is very good. However, it runs right through, and it's going to be a bit difficult to sort of leave it as it is. So what I'm going to do, I think I'm going to open up a bit more sort of smaller cracks in it. And yeah, so probably I think I've got a nice knot up here, which is cracking. That's going to fill up as well. Anyway, how deep it goes. So I'll probably add up some more irregular cracks.
Okay, I'm gonna post this one. I'm gonna stop sharing. I'm gonna show you what I actually did with another piece of what I did was with I think it's what I show you this one here.
Okay, we back.
Is the screen shared or not?
No.
No, we got the
back.
Let me stop that. Sorry, excuse me for that. And
right.
Let me share the screen. And I think it's this one. Yeah.
Get some nice crack. Let me start with this one here. Oh, yeah, the light is on. And managed to, that's the main big one.
Okay, so what I've done in here, I just sort of like went up to open up a few more cracks. I mean, which I wanted. I'll show you in the finished piece of that one. And
yeah, so I managed to get some good little cracks. There's some on the top, but I don't know how deep they go. If it's the middle, it's gonna go out anyway, so it's gonna be cut off. The second one, it's wonderful. Got some really nice irregular sort of patterns. Bottom up, spins, that sort of narrows up. At the top, there's some little ones here, which goes down, as you can see here as well. I got this one. And I think that's a really shallow one. It's not as deep. Which I got this one. That's a really nice one. You see, it starts right open, a big sort of like 5 millimeter from the top. It was right in, so it's gonna show. And then that's the one. I kept this one because I like the regular pattern on here. It goes in, and then it sort of like stops the wick at a piece of wood, and then there is that crack that goes there. It's wonderful. And now the mystery one. This one came out wonderful. I managed to get loads and loads of cracks in it. But as you can see already, as I was doing it, the wood is has been lying outside over something like 2 years. This big came out. That's where the big crack was. Yeah. Where the big crack was. Anyway, it gives me a good chance as well because I can clean that one very good. Otherwise, I have to get, my...
Okay, I'm gonna stop that one because, as you can see, my main aim was to actually introduce cracks into the wood so that I can actually make the features, in whatever piece I was turning. And one of the main point I think David was talking about is after I've actually sort of turned it. And what I will do is I'm just sorry, I'm just gonna have to stop that one there. Sorry. And let me just stop sharing there. Just 1 minute. What is that? And screen share. Okay, I'm gonna share with you now this video here, which oh, that's the wrong one. Sorry, apologize. I don't want this one. Oh, yeah, it is the one which I wanted to talk about. Okay, now there was a question earlier about what do you actually wrap your piece with. Everybody can see the shared screen.
Yeah.
Adam, can people see the shared screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So what exactly you wrap it on? I mean, what I'm using there is a piece of quite a thick, no, not polystyrene. I mean, it's an artistic piece of quite a thick plastic, but it's quite, I mean, heat resistant as well. And you would hear me, talking when in here that it's quite hot. The reasons what I've done is I've actually made a narrow, I've wrapped it quite tight. That's me saying it's really, sort of hot, and that's the time when school should close. And if
wrap around the wood, only gaps for the acrylic to be poured in, and hopefully everything goes okay. Now this, judging by the size of the cracks and the number of cracks I've seen, that should take about a little bit under a liter, probably about 1,000 mils, 800 mils, yeah, between 800 and 1,000 mils to fill all of them. That works out about a tenner, probably, for my price, which I've done. Just slightly under a tenner anyway. I haven't sorted out the color yet. And
leave that bit there. That's a little bit of a...
I've got my bottle here, but it's empty now. So, all right, I'll speak to you once the acrylic's about to be poured.
Okay, let me just stop sharing that. Now, once the okay, I'm not sharing now. Once the I've actually poured the acrylics in, mine, as I said, it actually gets really hot, and once it sets into our a piece comes out like this. Yeah. And there was that question about whether the wood shrinks or the acrylic would shrink or whatever. I mean, my personal experience through that is you must not work your acrylic. You must leave it for a minimum of 24 hours before you actually do anything with it. Yeah, so just actually leave it so that it can actually be set, and then you can actually, before you use it. Otherwise, something will happen to it. Either the acrylic will continue expanding, or the wood would work around it. And if it's not properly sealed, it will actually create cracks near to the where the acrylic seals with the wood. So it's better to leave it minimum of 24 hours. The longer you can leave it, the better it is. And it will actually become, a better piece. Then after that, after the minimum of 24 hours, I would actually mount it on the lathe and decide what, shapes and patterns I would actually use. Now I'm going to show you different pieces which I've actually turned using acrylic. I mean, I've got a vase here, which is filled in with black and blue, I mean, acrylics here. And this one is, I think it's one of the pieces which I actually showed with little cracks at the top. If we see, we look at the top, we can see some micro lines on this side up here, some bigger, I mean, depth in here. And then on the side, I've got a thin, I mean, line on here, which widens as it goes at the top, which are things which I want to happen as I do it. And then I've got, if you remember that piece there, which was what it showed this, that features into the wood, which I was talking about. And that is something which I wanted to happen, I wanted to be kept into the piece, which I turned. So this one is the vase. This one is the black and blue, I mean, acrylic, a mixture of black and blue. And it's been turned to about 10 millimeters thick. I mean, the whole vase. The vase is about 32, I mean, centimeters high. Yeah, and that's the one piece. Another piece which I turned, same wood, is one with a green acrylic. And again, having different lines of it, from coming from up, down, and also from down, up. And which, again, if you put it, so sorry, I haven't got a proper light in here. If you put I put a light into it, you can actually see the light being reflected through it as well as it goes. That depends where you put it in the house. I've got also another piece in here, which is one with a blue acrylic, which again, this was the one that actually the piece came out. I mean, came off. I mean, a third of it came off. And I decided to use blue acrylic with this one. Got a big thick line here, and then a smaller, I mean, top, wider top, and it narrows up as it comes down. And so the main reasons, I've got another piece here, which one big, actually, this was, it has been actually, I mean, recommended from me by somebody, I mean, to make some things like that. In fact, it's gonna go for Christmas as a Christmas present. It's the same thing. And it's like, I managed to get only 2 cracks in this one because I didn't want to get, I mean, more than that in it. And yeah, so this is how I actually used acrylic. I used it not simply to fill up, I mean, the cracks in wood, but also to sort of to create an artistic impressions and in the wood. And the type of resin I use is the epoxy resins. I mean, David shows that. I've tried different ones, I mean, before. And there are also different types of, resins out there. You've got the, one of the things when actually buying your resins, one thing you need to look for is the speed at which the resin sets. If it's a fast setting resins, then you have to work very, very quickly with it. And in the summer, especially when the temperature outside is quite hot, it will set very quickly. And if it sets quickly, it gives it less time to bond with the wood, and it will open up crack between the wood and the resin. So yeah, the best one which I use is the medium setting resins, which takes about between 30 minutes to an hour to actually set. What it does, it gives it time to penetrate all the little cracks and crevices in the wood, and all, as it sets. And it sets very slowly, so it creates a tighter bond between the acrylic itself and the wood. Somebody mentions about whether you use a sealant before you actually use the acrylics. I've tried that before. It's like putting, it doesn't work really, because the sealant is like an oil layer between the acrylic and the wood, and you don't need that. You need the acrylic itself to bond straight away with the wood to create that tight bond. Otherwise, if you leave it after a couple of months, it will actually open up as the temperature varies, and you will get the crack to appear. And yeah, any question, please?
Is it the same brand that David's using, Epoxy?
Yes, that's the one I use. And in fact, the only reasons, even with the Epoxy resins, there's still the three types, that exist out there. You've got the fast setting ones, medium setting, and the very, very slow setting, which will take about, you're talking with hours, you're talking about 24 hours, some of them to set. I don't like that one. Maybe because it takes a bit too long. I like sort of the medium setting, which is between 30 minutes to an hour, depending on the temperature.
Where do you buy them from, Emmanuel?
I buy mine, from the Amazon. In fact, David and I had a discussions about it, about how useful I find it, in terms of how easy it is to work it after it's actually set. Because if some acrylics, if it sets too hard, it will actually, you will have to sharpen your tools, every minute, really. So it needs certain degrees of softness, but also that degree of softness allows it to expand and contract as the ambient temperature changes wherever you keep it.
Do you buy it clear and add your own color, or do you buy it colored already?
Pardon, sorry?
Do you buy it as a clear liquid and then color it yourself, or do you buy it colored?
Yeah, all acrylics will come clear. This one is a clear one. There are certain acrylics out there which, when it sets with sort of like a misty, appearance, but the one, the Epoxy sets as a clear resin. In fact, it's the same resins that are used in people for making nails. Those artificial nails, and used by jewelers a lot in making jewelries and other products. I use it. I haven't got a copy. A pendant which I use. David, I think you've seen a couple. Some of the pendants I make, and I also use it for making pens. Acrylic pens, and pen blanks, and yeah. So it's for me. It sort of suits the purpose. It doesn't actually. It shines. That's one of the most important things as well, because some of the acrylics will tend to sort of get sort of like it loses the shines quite quickly, and that it doesn't suit my requirements.
What are the dyes that you add to it? Is it powder or is it liquid dye?
Yeah, I've tried various ones out there, but the one which I actually using at the moment is the acrylic that gives me sort of like a how can I say that? Like a snowy, cloudy, pattern as it sets, not just like one clear, or constant, pattern, color in it, but it gives like some, if it was during the day, we would actually have been able, I don't know if it would actually show in that. It sort of like shows different color, different level of opaqueness in the acrylic itself. So it doesn't look like one streak of blue, but that level of blue varies within it. And that's the powder one which I'm using. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Good.
Yeah.
Emmanuel, never mind the resin. What's the piece of wood, that quite white colored wood you've got there?
Oh, those ones, I've used them on ash. Yeah. But I use the ash, because it cracks quite a lot. It cracks very easily. So these ones, this is why I used it. But I use it on all types of wood. For making.
But those two pieces you've got there are ash, are they? Because they seem very white for ash.
Yeah, that's the variations in sparks, which has happened over the 2 years, which has, if you look at, this one, for example, this side, it looks a bit more opaque than to when
oh, yeah, okay, yeah. So
this side, then that's whiter. And I've got a smaller piece here. And if you looked, when I look this side here, that's,
yeah, I can see that.
When you turn it round, it becomes lighter, the color.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What are the powder dyes you use?
I haven't got it with me there. I can actually take the picture and post it on the WhatsApp. It's.
You know what brand they are?
Yeah, that's the things. I can't remember what brand. It is outside in the workshop, and
okay.
And I'll post it on the WhatsApp website and. But again, there's loads of different dyes and colorings out there, and it depends also what you sort of want to make. Like when I'm using pens, I tend to sort of mix different colors, making pen blanks. I use different colors. Instead of the one I use for vase, and so I get the patterns of colors. The twisting technique. Yeah, I just pour it down and then with the curvy metals inside, and then twist it and lift it up. So you get that sort of artistic distributions of the color, which comes out quite nice in pens.
Have you tried alcohol inks? They give a very transparent, clear color.
Yeah, the clear color, you can actually, that's fine. I've tried to use that in pens, and but I didn't like it. I've used the clear color on a table. Not in a table, but the river sort of running table, and that came out quite nice. And that was okay, because it looked like two pieces of wood hanging. It looked as if there was a space in between the table, but that in the middle of the table, but that was okay. But for other purposes, I don't find it quite attractive in a vase, really, if it's just on its own.
Yeah.
How dry was the wood that you used for those big vases?
How
dry was the wood?
Everybody I like working my wood very dry. Normally like 15% or less. I wait for it, it gets dry.
Have you tried speeding up the process by microwaving it hard?
I I mean, from a scientific point of view, I don't like the idea of using microwave on wood, because what it does, it kills the structure of the cells in the wood, and that doesn't really allows the wood to have a longer lifespan, because the cell, not just sort of the wooden cell, just sort of like get distorted. That's what the microwave does, because it hits it from inside out.
I'll change mine.
No, you can still use it. I mean, a lot of people, especially if you're using a big piece of wood also, you need a big microwave. I mean, I've got most of my vase are like 30 centimeter plus. Yeah, and you really
industrial microwave.
You can't put that. Yeah, you can't put that in a microwave. But I don't like the idea. I mean, it's it doesn't work. I mean, for me, yeah. But some people like it. But I would like to hear from people that have used microwave techniques for drying, how long it actually, stay dry. Does it sort of like stay dry, or does it reabsorb a certain level of moisture quite quickly?
Yes, you can overdry with microwaves, but then up to an equilibrium. Normally about 12% for inside a house.
Mm-hmm.
So
and it will maintain.
Go ahead.
So it will maintain that level of humidity inside.
No. It just comes to equilibrium with wherever you're keeping it.
Yeah.
Wow, that was really great.